Welcome to Your Chapters, Your Story. I'm Teresa Schindlebeck. I'm obsessed with storytelling because the moment you own your story, you stop outsourcing your life to other people's opinion. Today, I'm sitting down with Dr. Rod Berger, author of The Narrative Edge. And don't listen to this passively. Listen like it's about you, because it is. So I'm starting with one question that changes everything.
What's been going on with the book? I can't say sort of who or where, but I am getting, it's pretty neat because I'm getting publishers in other parts of the world that are interested in licensing it. So that's kind of that's a new world that I'm getting used to, which is, how does that all work?
How did that kind of come about?
Very lucky, Teresa. I got it. This was, when was this? This was a year ago, fall of 24. They reached out to me. Wiley started reaching out to me and asking if they could chat with me. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting, right? I'd had that a few times in the past, but not from a publisher as big as Wiley. They were interested in storytelling. And I said, if you're looking for like a 5-step kind of book, that's just not who I am in that way. And they were like, no. We just want you do you, which was like an awesome thing to hear. And then shortly thereafter, got the publishing deal set. And then manuscript was due last March, so almost a year ago. And and then it came out in November. And now I'm actually finalizing what we would call a field guide to The Narrative Edge, which is an entirely different writing approach. It's basically, if you read The Narrative Edge and you sort of understand the premise of where storytelling lives in our lives, then you get this field guide. It allows you to then dive into your own story as a leader, as a parent, as a community member. What do you think, Teresa? I mean, sometimes I think it's, there's just a general fear, right? It's almost like a childlike fear that we're not going to be accepted in some form or fashion. And so we whittle it down. It's like a piece of clay, and we just keep whittling it down to what we think might be digestible, but to the world. And in doing so, we lose a bit of ourselves, I think, over time. And then you sort of wake up one day and say, is this me? You know, like, am I living my authentic self, or what feels authentic to me? And, or do I even feel connected to the story that I think is me? So I'm sure we probably agree on a lot of things.
It's hard to look at your story sometimes, right? I know I briefly had talked to you about your story in your childhood was like you had a pretty good upbringing. But a lot of times for people to look back at their story, it's scary to look back on really how you got there. And so you are so far from who you were as a child into adulthood that you don't even know where to begin. It is really hard to stop and look in the mirror and really kind of be like, who am I? Especially if you've been walking around as one person, you know, and all of a sudden you're starting to write your story. Was I really like that? Or did I really like that? Or should I have went this path or that path? But I mean, we wear so many masks, and it's scary. I think a lot of people are afraid of letting people down too, to share their story. So if I all of a sudden share my story and how I really felt, or that feeling of really being seen, we're so concerned with all these other people and what they think of us. No one wants to hurt somebody. And so it's hard to get back to a real self and to feel that you could share it with people, especially if you've been living that way for so long.
And I think generationally, by the way, that was interesting when you said that I had you thought that my childhood was relatively easy or good or whatever. It's funny how when we hear someone else say that, you know, you have like a visceral reaction to that, because I wouldn't put it in those words, but I understand why you might say that. So what I think is interesting about sort of, you know, to your point about like waking up one day and like, am I who I think I am, or am I the reflection? Like, what am I giving off and what is being reflected back to me around my environment? I mean, what's fascinating now is that I think you and I are of a generation where there were still sort of these boxes, these sort of unofficial guidelines or grids that we lived within. Right. There was sort of us before, let's say, school or work. It was that time then during the day. And then there was sort of how we were at home after school or work, you know, and the weekends were different. But everything now, it's like personal and professional. It all blends together in such a way where, I mean, look at the percentage of people that either work flexible schedules or they work remotely. There's no way getting around it. I mean, it's commonplace now that people just can't attend a meeting because they have to do something, you know, with their child, you know, a doctor, whatever it is. But I remember growing up where that would have been, you just wouldn't do things like that, or someone else had to do it, right? And so I think that does impact our story, because these things bleed over, right? It's the classic. It's like Wonder Years. Dad always they always show this. And I always think, why did they make this choice? But it was a fantastic show in the 80s. But that dad would like walk in the door, right? And the voiceover of Kevin. And, you know, he would like kind of just, you know, throw the door open, like grab a drink and go hit the lazy boy, you know? And it was just, everybody was like, leave him alone. That doesn't work nowadays. And that sort of classic presentation. Because we communicate about all of it, and it's all over our social media. I mean, it's just, there's no break, I think, in the action. And it, I think, is probably pretty confusing for people when they think about, like, what is the story I'm wanting to tell? And do I even want, to your point, like, do I want to tell it? I don't know if people honestly want to tell it, because I think there's sometimes, it's human nature. We're afraid of, like, what are we going to discover? Are we going to find that, wow, I thought I was in this chapter of my life, as an example, but maybe I'm not. Or I've always been walking around like I'm the hero of my story, but I'm like the hero and the villain in the same character. Like, I keep cutting myself at the knees and sabotaging the very thing that I want to accomplish.
I always think of a movie. We're all playing a character. Like, who are the people who are in your show throughout your life? You're your main character. Who are all these people around you? I mean, they're all in your story.
They're all in your story. And I talk, this is one thing that I wrote about in the book, and it is very sort of US centric in this way, even though I share stories from my travels around the world. But it's like that public elementary school where the stage, is in the same sort of room as the cafeteria, right? And so you have like the elementary play, and it's like, oh, Teresa's the main character, and in this one, Rod plays the oak tree. Oh, fantastic! Or I play the old guy sitting on the bench during half the play. What I think is fascinating about that is it takes our adult issues and drops them immediately and says, okay, what role am I? What role was I? And it also makes us think about the audience and how close we are, our proximity to the audience of those around us, right? Those in the cheap seats, those people potentially that we work with or that are in our community at the soccer field. And maybe we have a role where we're just sitting in the audience. Maybe that's okay. There's a gentleman that I know in Sweden that I've worked with in the past who, what he found out, Teresa? He is a fantastic number two. Like, he came to a realization that while everybody just assumes they have to go to be whatever that number one is, right? The founder, the CEO. He realized his best successes of his life professionally were when he was slotted in as a number two. And it sounds so trite, but I just think that's a really interesting observation. And I think lesson for everybody, that's sort of one size fits all. Like, we should know better, right? That it takes all kinds to build up a community. Like, if you and I were going to write a story, right? Like, we would want to paint that picture. It's like, okay, what's the landscape? What's the environment? What's the time frame of it? Like, you start to draw these things out, it all layers together. This is why you go to a restaurant, and if I gave you a recommendation, you would say, okay, well, so the food's great. I'd go, yeah. And you'd say, well, what's the ambiance like? So, because that matters. Like, all of these elements matter in a story. And I think that we are just so sometimes singularly focused on, well, I was told if I'm not number one, there's no point in anything else. Well, that's a struggle. That's really tough to then author your story moving forward, isn't it?
That's why people feel never enough.
That's exactly right.
Right. I'm an overachiever. Even when I got to the spot I wanted to get, then it was like, well, what's the next spot? What's the next role? I mean, it was never enough because you're constantly moving that target. We feel lonely, and we feel like we can never have enough because we don't feel enough in those stories.
And you know what? That's such a key point you just said, feel enough. Like, It almost feels like we should almost teach this, I think, sometimes, because something has happened in our society, at least in Western society, where we completely have dropped the notion of experiencing the full human spectrum of emotion. To feel elation means that you understand what it means to feel despair, right? Sometimes it does, I think, you need an intermission in your story where you just kind of step back, even if it's 5 minutes, or it's just a sitting having a coffee by yourself to say, that was a really rough stretch, but I've checked every emotion through that experience. And you know what? At the end of it, I think you're wiser probably from that. You can communicate and share about it. You can attract people from sort of this sort of magnetism about shared experience. I talk about some, pretty heavy stuff in the book in different ways, because I want people to understand that story is not just convenient. It doesn't just show up in some sort of shiny packaging. It's all around us. And when you actually share, you find out other people, they've had a lot of the similar experiences. At least they know the feeling of it, right? You may not have the exact, but you say, I know what Teresa means. Like, I envision it. We're different people. We live in different places, but like, when she says that, I know that feeling, That's where relationships come from.
That's why I actually love the podcast, was the fact that people were sharing a story so that other people felt like they had somebody relatable to what they were going through. That's the key to me, is the relationships. How do you feel like when you're in the lonely parts of your life or your story where somebody else has a similar story and you can kind of step back and go, wow, okay, she gets it or he gets it, and gives you that sense of hope at that point that maybe your story doesn't have to stop here and it can continue on.
I'd be curious, do you think sometimes I wonder if we are like, we may have risky behaviors just as sort of humans, like we take risks all the time. We go through a yellow light or we eat something we shouldn't or whatever it is, right? But sometimes I would think that we are so nervous about the emotional response to like diving into their own story that it's like, I'm going to pass on that. I can't do that because the risk is potentially too great. And that sort of apathy around it. And that's something that I just think, gosh, because I will say it is a slippery slope. So I don't think people are wrong, altogether wrong, because you tell me this, like once you feel the sort of the emotional power of understanding your own story, or at least you're open to the exploration of it, right? Doesn't mean you're ever going to find like the answers. It's sort of an ongoing thing. You don't want to go back to that world of sort of just blind ignorance. I don't. Right. It's almost addicting in its own way. But that's sort of you cross this threshold where you just go, gosh, there's so much more to life than just, I don't know, whatever suburbia offers in that regard. Right. Like, okay, I live within a quarter mile. I can go to the gym and the grocery store and a Bed Bath and Beyond, and I think I've made it. No, that doesn't do it. Do you find that though, that like once you allow it, you either seek it out or you just say, I don't want to go back to that world where nothing really mattered.
I think it's both. I'm in my 40s. And I think when things knock you down or you go through those messy chapters, something happens, it's either you don't want to go back. Like for me, I'm around a lot of people that want to start discovering themselves. A lot of type A, were so driven in their 20s. They didn't have time to really think about their story. They were just so driven and the direction they wanted to go. We had no time to look back. So then, when you're 40s, you're like, wow, how did I get here? That's kind of that, whether it's a moment of something tragically happening, or they recognize something and they don't want to go back. They're like, I've been there. I've lived that. I need to create a story for my second half and just accept all of what was and move forward. And they don't want to go back.
They don't want to go back because I think they've found something. Like, I'll give you an example, and I hadn't thought about this until just now. My 11-year-old daughter really enjoys documentaries, and I love that. And of course, I'm guilty as charged because I may have been the one that sort of put them up sort of on the table, right? But now, when it's like, oh, what do you want to watch? 9 out of 10 times, she will be looking for something. Like she's okay with heavy subject matter, even at 11, because she likes to talk about it and understand it and try to like think about what was life like back then or how would I have responded? So I do think for all of us, regardless of our age, if we feel that something has connected us emotionally, that's kind of the drug, isn't it, to some degree? Like you want to go back to that and then you potentially judge things based on, did it move me in some way?
Yeah, we're emotional beings. We really are. Emotions drive, I think, everything. I'm very logical, but my emotions are ultimately what pulls me towards something. It pulls us from a passionate standpoint and desire to actually want to go, whether it's discovering more or do more or be more. That's all emotional based, and that's where curiosity comes.
Absolutely. That's the fun, right? To me, that's the childlike, like when we first have wait a minute, why? And you have to negotiate with them. It's like, sometimes we don't want to go, but it's like, well, what happens if you open that box? Oh, wow, there's a surprise. Like we kind of get conditioned in that way, that curiosity. And that's where my storytelling, I didn't realize it until after I was done writing the book, because people kept asking me, like, where do you think it started? And I'd love to get your response on where you think your first memory of being just curious beyond it's maybe a typical kid. But my late father did a lot of travel around the world, and I would always like run into his room when he would be unpacking, from a trip. And I would always want to know, tell me, what was Athens, Greece like? Or what? He wouldn't share anything. He wouldn't share anything, Teresa. Nothing. And I think if anything, that was the old German in him, right? And I can say that. But for whatever reason, it may have done me, like, it might have been a benefit because you want the things that you can't have, right? And so just built up like, well, wait a minute. So now I'm going to construct my own idea of what it was like on his trip for him. So then you get sort of, I think, creative in your own mind and storytelling. But you're like, I want to know more. I want more because you're not giving me anything. You're literally giving me nothing. So that's for me. How about you?
I would say, I was listening to what you're saying, and I had the crazy child abuse, when I was younger. But I would say that generation, those parents were emotionally unavailable. It wasn't just your German dad. It was that generation of we had to guess. But maybe that was the beauty of it, right? Think about it. We couldn't ask a lot of questions and get a lot of response. So what do? We create in our heads our own narrative, our own story. At a young age, we're constantly creating narrative in our head because we don't know.
And would you say that like, as you said that, it made me think of like all the things that, and you're probably right, a generation where there wasn't a lot of sort of give back emotionally in that way, because like, I remember you sort of like it'd be like a game you could play. Like, how many different topics could you not bring up as a kid, in our generation? Like money was you never asked anybody about money. There are all these sorts of things. And so you think, okay, well, maybe how does that translate into an adulthood where you just grew up saying, no, you never talk about it, which means you can't develop a relationship where you're not stressed or, like all of those sorts of things. And I'm sure we would each have our own sort of respective lists, but probably as a result of not having the ability to sort of test these hypotheses as we were kids, around a dinner table, because you don't ask your dad that, or you don't, we can't pursue that with mom, right? That's not gonna work. I don't know. Maybe it did help us creatively.
I think it helps us creatively, but I would say emotionally, that's the struggle when we were younger, like to emotionally connect from a relationship standpoint, because you're like constantly craving it and not getting it back. Right. So think about you grow up all of a sudden going into getting all these people's stories. That's exactly what you did with your dad or tried to. What do you do with your life? You are asking all these people to share their story.
You mean I'm that annoying 8-year-old?
I mean, but think about how ironic that is. It's
no,
like
you're dead right. You're exactly right.
Inner child craving. That's just like, I want more of it. I can't get enough of hearing what people do, why they did what they did, where they went. That became your adult life. And
an extension to that, if I could bolt onto that, there is something I absolutely will agree with you and admit that I think a good interviewer, if you can be present in the moment with the person that you are interviewing and capturing their story in a way that feels novel to them, not just like this rote, like everybody does the same thing, they will connect with you. That's probably the drug in there, right? It's not that you're just getting an answer, but you can tell that this has gone way beyond just people like to talk about themselves. They really love sort of this, I don't know where we're going in this amusement park I've never been to and within my mind, but I appreciate that you're my guide and we're going through all these stories, right? Oh, look at that. That is a drug because you can feel the connection. And then for myself, I'll know it's something, I'm like, man, I'm really curious about this in my head in the moment. And I don't even worry about like, can I ask that? Because I can already tell that they will respond knowing that it's meant with the best of intention. It's not because I'm just trying, like there's a gotcha moment or just trying to get them to say something off kilter at all. But yeah, it is absolutely that connection where you just go, in this moment in time. I love it.
Think about it. I mean, you've been doing it since you were younger. You have a gift. I mean, you've been doing it.
Well, I've also had some wild back in like my mental health days and all that work and the environments that I was in. I mean, for me, what it did, Teresa, is it pushed the boundaries of where we think there's a definitive line of where sort of the world is that you operate. It's like, whoa, sometimes the footprint of where these people, where their minds go are much larger and more expansive. And you've got to be able to dance, sort of that emotional dance with them to understand in these environments that you only see in the movies because they do exist. So I think, and when you do that, you have no time to like prepare or edit. If you are, spending time with someone who's had a traumatic brain injury and or has committed some incredibly heinous crime or crimes, or you don't have a moment to go say, well, no. Like you have to be present in there for everybody's emotional and physical safety. So I think those environments had to have helped, I guess, expand that field of play for me where I've had those. I mean, look, talk about a juxtaposition. And this part I talk about in the book. The other part I haven't, but I'll share here is that I've had the experience being in very remote places in Africa where I have been told that there are the young people that I would have encountered out in the bush, that I was the first white face that they probably saw, right? Now you wouldn't put that on a bucket list, but I can tell you as a human being of this planet to have an experience like that, there are no words to do it justice. It's a connection in a moment that you can never replicate how powerful that is. And on the other side of it, in my old world in clinical psych and mental health, I've had to have these like deeply human conversations with people who are suicidal and asking them, what is their plan? Like trying to understand that because you have to be able to ask somebody who's at that level of despair. to understand if they're just, if it's a call for help or sort of what needs to be done. But you put those two things on the table and it's like, nothing reminds you of the sort of the frailty of just existing, and how powerful that is. And sometimes the best stories are when we sit within that space. Doesn't mean that we are narrating it or we are sort of authoring it in the moment, but we are, it's like a decanter. We're letting the wine breathe, And so, yeah, I mean, that's been incredibly powerful. And I do now. I mean, I can tell when I've been, doing all kinds of work on the book and these other things where I'm thinking to myself, I need to connect and capture somebody's story around, something. It's like I'm excited about an interview that I've got. There's a young woman that just recently, she was all over the news, but she rowed across the Atlantic Ocean by herself, Taryn Smith. And we followed her. Every day she would post, and I think her mother would share it, on Instagram. Yeah. So every'd be like day 38, day 39, just by herself. And so that interview's coming up, and I'm very excited about that because you just think, can't even fathom what that was like. So I'm excited about that, and I hope I can do that, do her story justice.
I can't imagine what she was thinking. There would be so many questions to interview her. I could see why that would be great.
One thing I'm sure I'll explore is just when you have an experience that I don't think you or I could I'll say for myself, I haven't had that kind of an experience for that amount of time, is how do you re-enter?
Yeah.
It's almost like a soldier coming back, like sort of a re-entry process, or an astronaut coming back. How do you operate in a world that I think we talked a little bit about it earlier. It's just, what does that do to your view of the world around you? And the stories you want to partake in, the characters that you think that embody you and your sensibilities. So yeah, I'm fascinated by how that'll play out.
Well, how old is she?
I don't know. I'm just now. We just confirmed the interview this week, so I've got my prep coming up here. So I'll know all the. But she's younger than I am. I'll say that. But incredibly brave. I mean, one example, she was sharing, she'd have to go underneath and clean the boat because it will slow you down rowing, and just the fear of what's below, I just can't even thinking about it. I get nervous and my anxiety,
It's interesting what makes somebody want to do that, right? It's all those questions of what got you there? That's a whole nother level of, determination and drive for some achievement. But that's the story that's fascinating, right? What are you thinking and why, and asking those questions, right?
Super powerful. And her bravery, it's off the charts for me.
Yeah. Well, I love it. And I definitely would not want to do that, by the way. I actually have a bunch of questions for you.
Let's go.
Because of your book and your background. So I wanted to start out by, I always think people want to know, with storytelling, they want to get to the truth. And obviously you've done a great job getting people to open up and, interviews. I'm just going to give you a sentence and just finish it. If you're not telling your story, blank.
If you're not telling your story, then who is?
What do you mean?
Meaning, and I said, this is funny for your listeners, we didn't plan that, or your viewers. No, but that's a core question that I ask. If you're not in charge of authoring your own story, then who or what is? So there's that sort of, do you have the reins of your story? Right.
Why do you think it's important to, obviously you're sharing your story. Why do you think it's important for people to share their story?
I think it's a core human need that we have to have an understanding, a comprehension that we are valued and we have value. And the only thing that we have at the end of the day, it's I think about, my previous work at Vanderbilt's Business School with these incredible young people. It's just if you take away a business card and you don't have a title or a label, how do you communicate that your value to an environment or a group or an opportunity? You have to lean back into stories that help to paint a picture of who you are beyond what I think you might be based on a title or some degree that you've attained. And there's a level of it's agency, right? Without agency, what are we, right? We're just sort of a part of the cog in the wheel, and nobody at their core wants that. Or if they do, they don't need, it's not about having the spotlight at all. It's just that I'm here, I have value, right? I am flawed and amazing in all the ways that humans are. And I'm standing here representing myself to some degree. So yeah, it's if I'm not telling my own story, then I have to be very worried about who is.
Why do you think so many people are performing, whether it's online and in a relationship?
Well, I mean, you could argue that they're performing because that just tells you how far they need to get away from whatever they're trying to avoid, whatever that sort of the monster under the bed, right? Kind of thing, or in the closet. That there's something in them that says whatever they bring is not good enough. And so they have to manufacture something that they think reflects what is appealing given that time and circumstance. It's a bit of the definition of like kids in middle school. They're growing. There's this awkward phase, all these things that basically say, look how abnormal I think I feel amongst my peers, right? And so it's just a brutal attack on your self-esteem. Maybe we don't get out of that, right? And so we have to paint this picture. And look, the Facebook, and you and I now have, just because of our ages, I mean, like we've seen it where it's very fascinating because we didn't have it before. And then all of a sudden it shows up and you start to see people. I remember, I don't see this anymore, but it would be like, like someone, like the husband would say something and you'd go, well, I know they're arguing these days. So maybe is he just like throwing that out into the ocean of social media so people give him pity? Or they'll try to paint this amazing picture of it. Now that stuff still goes on, right? Everybody looks amazing on Facebook, the family photos. So there's some of that, I think, that's conditioning where you go like, wow, you mean I can edit how I look or sound like relatively easy now? Oh, this is amazing, right? So it's like taking this, digital Botox to our lives and trying to put the best foot forward.
What do you think people are actually afraid of?
I think right out of the gate, we're compared in so many ways to those around us. We just are. I mean, I used to do a lot of work and focus a lot, this is years ago, on boys in education, right? It's just like, it would start very early. There were studies where, it's like, how many different colors would kids, boys and girls, use in like kindergarten when they're coloring? Girls would use all these, like, they would use so many more colors than the boys. The boys would do like stick figures and whatever. And it would like, you say one thing to a kid, it's like, oh, little Johnny, if you could just add a little, hey, next time you draw grandma and grandpa, like, I don't know, draw a tree, color it, what you're telling him is that what he did prior to was not acceptable or good enough. And so we're guilty of these things unintentionally, of dropping these little hints that say, okay, maybe I don't fit here. And then you start to see it like in the athletic field with young kids where some parents are really pushing and it's very clear the kid is just not in this lifetime. They're probably not going to be an athlete. Totally fine. They're going to be an amazing singer, whatever it is. And yet they keep pushing them to do it. And it's like, you can tell that they don't feel comfortable in that. So I think it's all around us, but we just get planted these sort of, it's like, okay, all right, I see how it is. And then the boys' side of it too, principals would talk to parents and say, well, he doesn't sit calmly in his seat. And you kind of go, well, because I used to do a lot of work in schools, and you go, okay, so we're just all assuming, and we're just this is a judgment that just, fidgeting a bit is not acceptable in this school, right? Is that what we're getting? Okay, let's just all be on the same page here. But, boys, that's how boys operate. Yeah, but we can't have, okay, but you know what you're doing? You're sending a message that he's not good enough or that he is flawed in some way. Right. Or in girls, we would do this in disciplines, academic disciplines like math and science. Right. So you start to see where you splinter off and you say, I know going in, I'm not 100%, whatever that is, maybe my best is hovering around an 86, just in some scale of what it means to be normal or some semblance of perfect in our communities. And you go, well, I'm sorry, there's a ding here and there's a ding there, and depending upon how we're constituted and either express that will then, I think, play out throughout our adulthood.
If you think about communication, we're constantly communicating. And why do you think people feel so lonely?
Because the communicating feels shallow. There's no connection to it. There's no, remember, in the business side, it's very classic. No one's been given the why. Like you and I are collaborating on some project and one day we sort of look at each other. It's like, what do we like? Oh, okay, great. We're going to get it done. But like, do you feel connected to this? Like, do you know why you've been pulled into this project? Do you know what happens if we do it well? It's classic corporate where you never told the why, or if you're given a why, it sounds so superficial. You almost want to sort of yell from the back of the boardroom, like, really? Is that like, do you get that from the press release? So that there's never a connection as to this is why we need to be doing this. That's why people just say, oh yeah, okay, we're just one more initiative that we're going to run through. It's, it's fall time. We know what that means. New initiative that will kind of go into the holidays and then we'll forget about it starting Q1 and we're off and running doing the same stuff. And you're going, there's no value. I'm offering no value to this and no one's connecting me to the objective that supposedly we're supposed to have.
With your background and what you've done, what do you think creates trust instantly?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Trust instantly. I don't know if there is sort of one magic approach to it. But what I would say is that I do think as humans, I think we can pick up on energy and intention, which is why most people at some point in their life will have some experience. Hopefully it never goes beyond it, where you sort of say, something doesn't feel right here. Like the energy in the room or that individual, like I can't put my finger on it. I can't put words to it. But I'd rather not see that person again, or something feels off.
Yeah. Like that intuition, right?
Yeah, that intuition. And so I think we can sense safety. We can sense, it's like a baby, right? Like, people that are sort of, I think, anxiety ridden, or they just sort of give off this very sort of sterile sense about them. Babies don't like to be held or even try to be coddled by them, because then they'll respond accordingly. Same with animals. So there has to be something from a trust perspective that people have to be picking up on. And I would even tie it to even my work in this way. I mean, there have been plenty of times where I would have, you're famous Teresa, and I'm going to be interviewing you on camera in person, and I've never met you in person, but you turn the corner with your handlers, and I've got like 90 seconds. They're miking you up. And then, so in that exchange, and then sitting and getting the countdown, you have to feel for me that I'm going to treat this conversation with care. Right. And I can't use my words to do that. It's that feeling too. And then you can see how that fans out. You can have it where going back to, and I write about this a lot because like youth coaching, kids pick up on that energy on when there's a parent that's coaching that really invests in them. This is not just about doing it because they were told to do it by whatever, or they needed someone to step up and be a coach. This is why first dates either go really well or really bad, because you just, in that immediate, you go, I don't know if this is going to work out, but I do enjoy this person in this moment, right? There's trust. I feel like I can connect with them. So we have countless examples in different environments where there has to be something to it, because we don't have time sometimes to, like, I guess, engage in all these activities to say, okay, now have we built up trust here? Do you trust Coach Rod? And kids are like, no.
Well, and I ran big teams, right? National teams. And I always say energy doesn't lie. You can walk into a room and no words spoken. And I can tell you within 5-10 minutes what's going on, positive or negative. And that's with words not being spoken. It's body language. It's a feeling and it's energy. You've done interviews. So I was thinking, how do you feel about trust? You're trying to get somebody's story and someone to talk, I
will say it reminds me, and I wouldn't have thought about it in the moment, but some of these experiences that I've had in other countries in the developing world where you're so aware of your own physical presence in that space because you are so different from the people around you and what you represent to them. You just go down this laundry list of things. You're just not that person standing there. You represent a whole country, a whole way of thinking, right? All these sorts of things. That is a fantastic sort of, not that everybody could do that. I know I've been very lucky in that way, but when you walk in and like the words will do no good. I've done interviews with people that don't speak the language in the middle of nowhere. And you think, how am I going to connect? Through a translator. That's when I think and you're teaching yourself that, look, it does matter how you walk into a room. This is like when I work with leaders, one-on-one on their story. It's like, well, help me understand this, because here's the gate. Here's how I'm experiencing you. And if you really want to work on your story and the way in which you come in as a co-author with everybody, you have to know you're coming in as the villain. The other thing too is you have an opportunity, I think, to be vulnerable in a way that's not like you're playing like a victimhood at all, but you're doing it. It's like this self-deprecating approach where people just go, okay, this person is not here to harm or to inflict sort of their, incredibleness, right? Like how wonderful they are on everybody. They're willing to step outside of themselves and be uncomfortable. I think that's a huge thing, because in my public speaking world and keynoting, a lot of what I'll do as well is these sort of moderated keynotes where you'll have it'd be me capturing the story of the CEO in front of their people. And it's so fascinating because it'll be like internal teams. Every year they'll have their big whatever conference or summit for their big corporation. And every year it's the CEO standing up thinking that everybody wants to hear them. But the truth behind the scenes, they're going, gosh, how do we try to soften this? This landing is always going to be rough. Well, that's a nice thing to flip, because it's like, okay, they still want the stage time. But if someone like me or others capture that person's story in an organic way that's not practiced or rehearsed, guess what happens to the leadership and the team and the organization? They look at the leader and they go, never knew that about them. I never knew that about Teresa. And guess what happens? Now that I didn't know that, but I'm seeing that Teresa's a lot like me in some ways, I'm going to get behind you even more and want to support sort of what we're doing as a company. So it's like these subtle flips on these sorts of things to build that trust where people can, it's that trust, it's that feeling, that it's the body language, like you said, that helps to move that needle.
I mean, I've been in the corporate world. Culture to me is everything. So I think if a CEO can get up there and show the humble side, the humanity side of somebody and of themselves and their life, I mean, I think a team is just a domino. It's the shadow of the leader thing. It goes all the way down into the organization. I've seen it transform a company actually when the CEO can actually get up and show that side. If you just want to go up there and tell the same story and the very surface level, we can't have vulnerability. Probably not getting very far.
We're not, and we're all looking to recruiters we always sort of check in with a recruiter that pings us on LinkedIn because we just want to be ready. We may have to jump ship at some point in time.
Yeah, it's true. Give me 3 truths about the narrative edge people can use immediately.
3 truths. Wow. Okay. I've not been asked that question. The one truth is that I think one of the objectives I had in the book was I wanted to, one, be vulnerable enough to share my stories alongside sort of the lessons that I was sharing based on my experiences, because I've always grown up, I could never handle, especially sort of in college, when you would have a professor that acted as if they were born a professor, and you're just thinking, you're sitting there, looking at them going, were you just born yesterday? Like, were you just born amazing, or did you struggle too? Ever? Once? No, maybe not. And so the one truth is I tried very hard to paint the power of story in our lives in a way where I am going to be just as vulnerable with you along that ride. And whether you read it because you're the CEO, or whether you read it because you're a new single mom or dad, or you're an activist, it doesn't matter, whatever, you're a coach. The one truth is that we don't have to be doing these things alone. The other one would be that the truth around the reality of what story is in our life, the role literally that story plays. I think that it's been very easy for us to be dismissive as a culture in the West, to say these are soft skills. Like that, even that to me is pejorative. No, not at all. And so the second truth, or a truth of it, is that you will probably laugh at some of these stories and think, I would never do that. You might cry because it makes you think. I show you story in every possible format that I can, because I'm trying to sort of drill home that idea, that truth, that story, it never goes to sleep, ever. It's the one constant. Our story is constantly being told. It just may be that these 3 pages are about me snoring and sleeping for 8 hours. But it's like a generator. It never turns off. The power will never go out. And I know that sounds kind of goofy, but it really is important when we think about it, because I think if you're reflective, you start thinking about intention. Like, well, okay, but why am I doing that? Right? Is this me running away from something because I just don't like the way this story is going? Right? I felt like I deserved better or more, or I didn't deserve all of that, whatever it is.
Yeah, and it goes back to kind of afraid of what other people think of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And the third truth is that their story matters. Like if someone walks away and says, now I'm recognizing, like you drilled it into my head, Rod, that whether or not I feel comfortable in my own story, I'm walking away going, it does matter. And sometimes that subtle phrase to people can be really transformative, to say you matter. Yeah, but I've never been told I matter. I'm like the last out of 5 kids, and I'm this and that and whatever, and I've been divorced. All these sorts of people might say, no, you matter. That is a huge thing. And so actually, I appreciate that question, because if they think about those 3, my hope is that will then translate when they go into the field guide. There was a book years ago, and I didn't even research it now for the field guide, but I just remember it forever. It's called The Artist Way. It's a classic book from the 90s is when I was introduced to it, but a lot of creatives have used that, The Artist Way. And it's sort of you're writing in this, you're journaling, you're walking through all of, I'm interviewing you basically through all of these elements of your story. And I think those that read the original book with intention in that way, to be sort of an open book, we'll get a lot out of the field guide, because it's like I'm literally there with them, interviewing them.
Well, and that's helpful too, kind of to your point of where do you begin? If you have a guide, some people think I need to start where I am today. Some people need to start on the earliest memory they had. It'd
be based on a topic. I'm working with a gentleman now on finding his story. The family has been incredibly successful generationally. And it's one of those, like, where do you start? He knew that his story, he wanted to figure this component out. And there was one word that was used. And so that's been like the tent pole. And everything sort of swirls from that to understand sort of where the story is and how does it impact everything from personal life and relationships to the professional successes. I think the easy way to say, oh, well, we're going to start Teresa with the origin story. Like, where did it all begin? These sorts of things. That's great context, but the meat is probably going to be more in the activity, that sort of comes after whatever that origin story is. And then you go circle back to it and that's when you're testing things out. Oh, I wonder if this applies. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
That's the beauty of hearing somebody's story. It opened up my story that I didn't even remember. There were chapters that had closed. And I was like, wow, I forgot all about that incredible time.
I mean, it's like an executive that I was working with who he could not figure out in his story. He'd worked at some very famous companies and was trying to understand sort of the legacy and sort of at this stage now, like, what story does he want to tell? Is there a story? Like, basically all the work he put in, was it worth it? You could distill it down to, and understanding just how he would operate with leadership teams and like the why of him in, staying weekends and working on massive projects just so that he could get into the leadership of these iconic companies. And like, at some point there was this sort of exchange of the spirit of him just to accomplish whatever that did to his LinkedIn profile and the stories that fit within those parameters. Right. And so it's fascinating to me.
I was just thinking about, like, going back to the three truths. What is the biggest lie people tell themselves about their story?
I think the easiest and cheap one, but cheap only because I don't buy it in this way, is that, like, my story doesn't matter. And by default, that means that I don't matter. I am of no consequence to the world continuing on, like if I'm here or not, or if and then that's where sort of the sort of desperation of, sort of out of the blue career moves, or, a parent like just moving out, or like all these sorts of things can happen.
How do you think you get somebody to get comfortable being like, I've been telling this story, but the reality is my story was really not that story?
I think a fun way to do that, and I say that, and maybe it's not fun for people depending upon the story they're trying to understand in that way, is to tell that story or retell that story, but from the perspective of somebody else that was in that scene.
If somebody wants to go back and they do want to share their story, but it's like, oh my gosh, opening that door of, like, they've saw this version of me, and what will they think, and how do you overcome that judgment around you that we live in, so that you don't miss out on sharing your story, which we just talked about is such a valuable thing. You should share your story. So how do you get people to get through that judgment? And what will people think of us? And our whole life, a lot of us do we're not good enough already. And then on top of it, you have, what will people think?
Well, and that's why, if you think about it, like, if you were going to really do sort of this analysis of somebody's Facebook page as an adult, and you sort of printed all their images up that they've posted about, it's like, okay, what are they trying to say? Like, they're not typing it out, but they're obviously, they're telling like a story through pictures. What do they want me to think about them? They're successful. They're well-liked. They've got smart kids, like whatever that is. They're trying to do that without using the words. So I think people, they want to, but they have this notion that sharing their story means they have to say something. And if I've got to say something, there's danger I have to admit something. And then anytime we think about even like admitting something, we have been raised to think that if you admit something, you're admitting a wrong or a mistake or an error, right? Is that really the case? Can we not be a little bit more sort of evolved as a species to understand that I can talk about sort of a choice that I made and walk through how I thought about it, and even then talk about maybe I could have taken a different path, or if I did, here's like, play it out a little bit more. We're not so simplistic. Maybe we are.
Okay. So this kind of goes back to a little bit of your work. The second the mic turns on, obviously, because you've interviewed people and people kind of start performing. For most people, it's natural to perform. We talk about the roles we play, the characters versus kind of that authentic self. What do you feel like gives it away that you know that they're performing versus being their authentic self?
One that I used to think about or worry about quite a bit years ago. For whatever reason, I feel like I've graduated from that, like that I trust myself that I'll pick it up and I'll take the questions in different directions to, I guess, counterbalance it to some degree. The one example was a a fantastically successful and a very nice woman who had been very successful, starting this company from scratch. And it was acquired, and she was in her industry. Like, you knew her name. Like, she just had really made a name for herself. Teresa, I interviewed her on more than one occasion, and it was just brutal because she was so polished, as if she had to be, that there was no sharing of anything. There wasn't like a grin that wasn't like choreographed. And I finally just told her people, it's like, look, I can be a big fan of hers and what she's accomplished and what she's doing, but and they admitted that it's so difficult because people don't want to interview her for that very reason. I just honestly, I am such a in the moment, my gut, knock on wood, it hasn't impacted me. But I'm hoping that that's only because there's that sense that I'm not there I care enough about the experience we're going to have over the next whatever period of time that I'm not here to tank it. This is about sort of connecting. I won't say this celebrity, but I interviewed this one celebrity. I don't even know why. Sometimes I'll do stuff, and in the moment when I say it, I'm thinking in my head, I can't believe you just said that. But I'm just trying to pick up on this one celebrity that I think is probably this. I had this feeling, I don't know, I don't know if they're going to be as affable as they are on TV, and they're always on TV. And their handlers were there. I mean, everybody was sort of everyone has to show their value, right? So they have to be on everything. And this guy's hair was so perfect. And I said to him, right out of the gate, I said, all right, come on, just be honest with me. What age did you start coloring your hair or something like that? And he it broke him completely. And he laughed and gave the best answer and then was awesome. But that was a huge risk because his handlers could have freaked out at that. But in the moment, it was just all right, we're two guys. There's no way you're not having some gray hair like I am. And I kind of just went with it, and that showed the human. I try to do those things to get people off where they go, okay, this is going to be I'll enjoy this.
What do you think makes someone more compelling versus accomplished? So
you may think this is a little bit off the range, but I don't. It's fun when you get pitched, right, from publicists and whatever. And sometimes, I can sense it that someone's sending they've got a new client that they're trying to pump up being maybe more accomplished than they are. And maybe it's someone I know, like the publicist or the PR rep. And so they'll call me and it's they're like, what do you think? And it's look, hold on. You've known me long enough. I think everybody's interesting. I've not found a human yet that's not interesting. It doesn't mean that I would want to start a business like maybe they did, maybe because I don't have that talent so I think everybody is fascinating. And especially early on, as I was building towards different levels of people that I would be in front of, I'd have to take that. Otherwise, they would pick up on that I'm thinking they're boring or they don't have enough, whatever that is, to warrant my attention. So I almost had to, in my head, say, no, you know what? Teresa has she's crushing it in her world and I want to know more. And if I do that, you'll have a good experience and then you'll tell somebody. Or if I then say, well, I just interviewed Teresa, and they go, you interviewed Teresa, right? Oh. And so that's kind of my thing. I love talking to, there's a guy that works in the produce section at Kroger, and he works 6 out of 7 days there. I've told this story before. And then the 7th day he works at Goodwill. So the man works 7 days a week. He's got 2 adult sons, and we couldn't be, I guess, more different, just sort of probably in our background, all kinds of things. We talk all the time. I love talking with him. And I love it when other people see that I'm hey, man, how you do? Because then what's happened? I see more and more people that go up to him and talk to him because he's just the nicest man who's quiet and does his stuff. So I shame on me if I can't find some interesting thread in a person who is nondescript on social media or, in their work that they do.
I actually have a Starbucks lady, and every time, even if I don't want coffee, I will go there just to put a smile on her face and have a conversation with her. I just love making her smile.
People remember those things. It's there's a guy, you think I would just hang out at Kroger probably, but his name is Brady. He won't know this, but he's just a young kid or whatever, but he cracks me up because I bagged groceries back when I was 14 long ago. And there's this energy about him. And, he's not the rolled shoulders, I'm a kid and I don't want adults to see me, but he's not, he just he looks relatively confident. And I know he doesn't know my name, but when he sees me, it's oh, I'm going to have a conversation with him, Brady, how we doing? It's man, I'm telling you, bagging groceries is that got my start, He's oh, I know, I'm really focused on it. And then now he contributes without me having to ask. I love that kind of connection.
I absolutely love it. What question do you ask, like, if you were interviewing people that I don't know if there's a set question knowing you've done so many, but that kind of breaks up if you feel like it's scripted, kind of like that lady experience that you had where there was no direction. It was just like you tried. But is there something that, in your career that you feel like if you know somebody is not being authentic, right? Or just kind of that surface level conversation, is there something you try to do to kind of break up that script to get that authentic side?
So I do this, but I don't know if I do it sort of intentionally or I'm just maybe picking it up non-verbally in the moment. And I'm genuinely curious, but I'll ask people, I'll take something like success. And instead of just talking about, let's say, your success and right, I could do that and plenty of people would do that. But for me, I talk a lot about like stopping the elevator between two floors. So if I do that, I'm not going to ask you like about your success. I want to know about your relationship to success. Help me understand the arc of that relationship. So I'll use the word relationship and that concept around a notion or some theme, and it works like clockwork. Because I'm not asking you for, like, don't sort of lay down your resume. Because once I've said, like, let's say I asked you that, like, Teresa, I want to understand, your relationship to success and how that arc has ebbed and flowed over the years, right? Well, now by doing that, your brain says, you say to yourself almost automatically, okay, well, now he's opened the door where he might ask me more about like my childhood or like just what was it like in the home, and that allows that sort of, we can go onto these sort of different paths than people would expect, right? And you might say a couple things. I might like, oh, wow, I'm curious about that. So, all right, so help me understand, what was the kitchen table like? What was dinner like? Help me understand like the sights and sound, like what was it? Oh, my dad was a chain smoker. He always just sat sort of in the corner and and we waited for him to leave so that my brother and sister and I could laugh with our mom for a few minutes before he yelled to say, pipe down or whatever, Okay. All right. Now, how do you tie that to your success? Like, were you always, and you're like, look, I always wanted to be in these bright environments where everything was always different or counter to cultural norms. Oh, so that relationship piece is big.
What do you think, like going into storytelling again, if somebody, I think of all the people I know that like are in that phase of life where I think again, it's not 40 to 50, I'm telling you, where people are more vulnerable and open. I don't know if it's like, again, some life changing
We're all seeking hugs.
Yeah, it's just definitely different. Or maybe because we didn't have the outlet when we were younger, right? We didn't have that connection of that relationship where we could have it, where it ebbed and flowed. There was the curiosity. So now we're definitely more curious, asking questions. What would be two things that you would tell somebody, hey, if you want to tell your story, here's two things I would think about before, so you can start telling your story.
Yeah, I would break it down. I'd say, okay, like what story do you want to get across? So in essence, it frees you up to just sort of say it without any editing in real time. All right, so the story is that this is what you're wanting to tell your team. Now I want you to tell me what you think the audience is expecting, and now marry those two, right? So in essence, because at the heart of it, you're going to find that they're going to say, well, they're probably going to, they're going to expect me to say something that's going to have to, they're going to be confused. It's going to be around change. It's some change initiative or whatever that is, or, and so that you want to get people thinking about the experience of the story that you're telling verbally and non-verbally to others. Because if you can sit in their seat, even for a moment, again, it goes back to being the audience. Like, I understand, Teresa, you're the CEO, you're the chair, whatever, the board chair, and this is the story you want to get across. All right, so what does that story look like if I'm sitting in the audience? That's another one, right? Well, okay, so what are the things that are going to be important? And or what is the audience, what's their version going to be? Give me the unvarnished, right? Now we're truth telling here.
Yeah.
He's a moron, about me and about myself or something, like, and like he just doesn't get it. It's the same story. You'll see that a lot. I know in the corporate world, right? You just know it's almost like an act. Like, they're getting up to do their set,
If you think about it, really in life, we take on roles. You're the mom, you're the dad, you're the CEO, the CFO, you're the student.
But how do you reconcile that? Let's say in your work life, you are, let's say, a leading character. But in your personal life, you are at best a supporting character, and you don't have enough scenes to even be considered to be a best supporting actor or actress in that. Right. And you think, well, why is there such this cavernous distance between what I feel like when I'm working and when I'm at home? Like, why? And you start to break those out a little bit, and you think, okay, why am I deferring? And it could be reversed. It could be that you feel that you are head of the household. And then, okay, well, what's that mean? But you're not exhibiting that within the teams and the organizations that you work. Like, what is that about? There's a story there somewhere.
That made me really self-reflect. I've played different roles in my life, but mostly, I was the career and super driven. It's interesting flipping it into the mom role where I had struggles with feeling less than in that role. You are playing a different character. It's constantly roles.
I mean, you're walking into wardrobe in the morning and they're like, no. You're like, well, what happened to oh, you didn't hear? You didn't hear they changed the plot.
So I just want to do rapid questions. Biggest lie successful people tell themselves.
They're unique.
What instantly makes you not trust someone?
I don't know what the word would be, but just like protectionism, like whatever that wall is.
Confidence versus performance difference.
Confidence, you're not afraid of the outcome, and performance, you're trying to manufacture the outcome.
A sentence people say that's actually a mask.
Something around fault, like a no fault, like it wasn't me. Like they jump right out of the pool. Like I wasn't in the pool and you're dripping wet. You're like, no, you were part of this. So some level of accountability or something like that.
Vulnerability versus oversharing. Where's the line, if any?
Well, I think the line is defined by being able to read the room, and typically the people that overshare are the ones that can't read the room. And what that then means is that we struggle in that instance, that character struggles to understand the environment with which they're in. Doesn't mean what they're sharing is bad or good or indifferent. It's just that they're not reading the room. And to fully understand your own story, you have to be able to chalk the field or know the stage so you don't fall off into the band or the orchestra. Right? Or fall backwards backstage.
What's one leader habit that makes teams kind of roll their eyes?
Always having the answer or acting as if you're communicating, probably even worse when it's nonverbal. Like, no, I've got this, Teresa. And whether I say that or my body language says it.
What's one leader habit that makes teams actually lean in?
I think it's that combination platter of curiosity that leads to a question. And it's the one where you can sense that, again, this goes back to that, confidence versus performance, right? That you're not worried about the outcome of what I'm asking, right? And because of that, you feel that, knowing that you may expose that I've done something wrong that I didn't know I was doing wrong, or that I made the wrong decision here. And you immediately pick up on that, and that creates connection.
What's one sentence you wish people would start saying?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Think about it.
Yeah.
Everybody feels like they have to have an answer. Like literally, How does this scene end? Did you do your homework? Like everything is like, it has to be perfect. We used to grow up in a world where you could change your opinion based on new information. Like that's kind of how we got to where we are. Like all this technology that we enjoy, it's because countless people around the planet said, there's new information here. And with new information, maybe we can make the phone smaller. You know what I mean? Like, so that whole premise to me is just broken. The fact that we have to be able to say, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
So my last thing I just was going to ask you was, obviously your book, The Narrative Edge, who is it for? And what do you want readers to do differently after they finish your book?
So it is for, put it this way, I've had people read it that are teenagers. I have had grandparents read it. I've had CEOs read it. I've had people in different cultures read it. And that's intentional to me. For me, a fantastic book or a movie, which I reference a lot of in the book, movies that stir my own emotions, it does not matter because if it's well done, you think about yourself within the context of those either the four walls of a book or the digital walls of a movie or a TV screen. And so it wasn't written for one specific group. And that's like people say, like, well, talk about feedback. The best feedback that I just say, okay, that's worth it, is when people say, when I've gotten people who've said, look, I read it going into it as a leader in my organization, and I walked out of it understanding how my ability to be a spouse and a parent and a community member is either helping me or hindering me. So it's more of a comprehensive approach to that. And that they would be putting themselves in the context of the stories I'm telling, which would make them go down memory lane. Then I feel like I've done justice by the stories I've shared of the people that were kind enough to allow me to explore.
Here's the takeaway. If you're not telling your story, then who is? Go follow Dr. Rod Berger and grab his book, The Narrative Edge. Links are in the show notes. Now send this episode to someone who needs it. See you next time.